Well, dear ones, that's, am I speaking too loud? All right. Uh, it's great to be with you again. Um, you're our church family away from home. Um, and we're always looking forward to seeing our children, but you're their church family too. So it's good to be with you again. It's a long way from here to Idaho, but we're going to enjoy a month or so of warmer weather now. We came down, my sister and I came down for a funeral this past Monday in Lodi. I was asked to do a funeral for a dear friend who had passed away. It was only 3 days from Thanksgiving, so we decided to stay with the children here in Angwin for Thanksgiving. And then it's only 2 or 3 weeks till Christmas. And so we decided it would be better to just stay here rather than traveling back to Idaho and come back to Angwin again for Christmas. So we're enjoying the warm weather. It's been about 26 degrees at our house recently. The message today, based on Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, entertaining angels. You know, throughout Scripture, both Old and New Testaments, there's a great deal of emphasis on hospitality. And we remember Abraham and his entertaining angels. The Lord himself, in fact. Isaiah 58, we usually think of the chapter as pertaining to the Sabbath, but in Isaiah 58, the Lord, in the context of fasting, the Lord says this, is verses 6 and 7, "Is this not the fast that I have chosen? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh?" What does he mean? He means not to hide yourself from your own flesh. Be willing to give your own clothing to someone in need. Actually, I had that experience in Indonesia. I was there for several years, not long ago, from 2011 to 2018. I had 7 boys in my house, poor students who were working hard, helping them through school. And over and over again, I was giving my clothes to these boys. And they enjoyed having their photo taken with Pastor Hancock's shirts, sweaters, suit, and so on. The Lord is saying, here he's speaking about hospitality. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry? That you bring to your house the poor. Bring them to your table. Don't just send them something from Dorcas. Bring them to your home. Take them in. Take the stranger in. And then Jesus in Matthew 25 also speaks of hospitality. You remember that those who are accepted into the kingdom are surprised when Jesus says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. I was a stranger and you took me in. That's hospitality. I once had a couple in my church who said to me, Pastor, we're really afraid to bring strangers into our house because our house is full of antiques, and we're afraid someone might come and steal all our antiques if they've seen them in our house. I hope none of us are in that situation. And then in the New Testament, church leaders, our elders, one of the characteristics of an elder is to be hospitable. A bishop then, bishop being the equivalent of our elders today, must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. That's a characteristic of a church leader, of an elder. He and his wife are hospitable. They take in the needy, the stranger, and so forth. That is very significant that it's listed. Hospitality is listed as one of the characteristics of a leader of the church. And then in Titus, we have that same characteristic. Titus 1, verse 7. A bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine. No problem in the Adventist church because we're all teetotalers. But in those days, elders were not to be drinking too much wine. Not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable. A lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled. But hospitality is right there among these other qualities of a church leader. And what we read here, of course, applies to us today, doesn't it? And then in our key text for today, all the members, all of us in God's family are to be hospitable, thinking of others, so forth. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some have unwittingly entertained angels. I'm going to I feel like I'm a long way from you, but I guess you're a long way from me. Um, I think I'll stay here. I want to come down to the floor, but you may not be able to see me so well, so I'll just stay here. I want to share with you experiences that my wife and I had during our years of ministry. I had a wonderful wife, and how many of you knew her? A lot of you in this congregation knew Janet, my wife Janet. I know you folks did. She was a wonderful wife, and she was her family were from the east, where people were rather reserved. My people were from the south, with very very open to strangers, and my wife was a wonderful host. I was always bringing people off the street. She never knew when I was going to bring someone home for the night, and she never complained. She was always gracious, prepared food, put people to bed, and never complained at all. It was really wonderful. We were living in Northern California on the coast, in Placerville, and one evening, Jan asked me to pick up something at a little shopping center about a mile from the house, and the sun was just setting. It was beginning to get dark, and as I drove into the shopping center, I noticed a young couple with backpacks walking along the road, and they came into the shopping center, and I went in and greeted them. It was cold. It was getting dark. They were hiking along the highway 101, and I thought, wow, it looks like they have no place for the night. And so I spoke to them and invited them home for the night. They were hesitant at first. I wore a long overcoat, and I've had several times in my life when people mistook me for a policeman or a private investigator or something, but they accepted. I brought them home. Jan prepared some soup and crackers, and I've forgotten what else. And while we talked, they told us that they had just buried in the forest, miles from us, their firstborn child, a little boy. And they were trying to get away, grieving for the loss of that baby boy. And they were hiking to Canada. It was really sad, and we prayed for them. They stayed overnight with us. The next morning, I took them 12 miles on their way to where our church was, and from the Dorcas, I gave them very warm clothes, jackets, and they went on their way. A year later, they drove into our driveway. They had a car now, and they shared with us again their experience of hitchhiking to Canada. they said they went to churches. They named the churches, the Catholic Church, Protestant churches, and they didn't get any help, which is a surprise. But then they remembered the Adventist pastor and his wife in Placerville, not Placerville, McKinleyville, and they went there to the Adventist church, and they said the Adventist church just supplied them with everything and helped them get started in a new place. And they came back to tell us about it. It was really a beautiful experience. We were pastoring in North Hollywood, Van Nuys, California, and one Sabbath, Janet and I were greeting the folk who were coming out of the church following this sermon. And there was a young couple who were visiting for the first time, and we invited them home to eat with us. We learned that the boy had, as a child, lived with an Adventist family for some time. He was not an Adventist, but he remembered living with them. His wife had a Catholic background, and they had visited our church that day because he remembered the Adventist family that he had lived with as a child. So they spent the afternoon with us, and as they were leaving, they said, Pastor, on Wednesday night, we're celebrating our first anniversary, and we would like you folks to come and join us and our friends to celebrate our first anniversary. So we went to their apartment. We could hardly breathe for the smoke. Everyone was smoking in those days. It was hard to breathe. We got acquainted with their friends. They had fruit juice for us to drink. We didn't drink what the other people were drinking, mostly young people. And then they had gone to special effort because, having eaten with us, they knew we were vegetarians. And so the girl had made deviled eggs and cheese for sandwiches and a salad. And they were so gracious. They were so happy to have the pastor with them for their first anniversary. They moved shortly after that to another place, and so we never were in touch with them again. But it was so special that these young people who didn't have much religious background wanted the pastor and his wife to be with them for their anniversary. Wasn't that beautiful? We thought so. We were living in Glendale, and one Friday evening, I don't remember the circumstances, but I was in the Los Angeles bus terminal. It was a big terminal with buses coming from all over the country, very busy place, and again, I was wearing my top coat, and there was a couple there that stood out like a sore thumb. They were Amish. He had his big black straight hat, and she had her bonnet and long dress, and they just they just stood out from that whole crowded place. And I thought, wow, they looked kind of lost. And so I spoke to them and asked where they were from and so on. And I learned that they wouldn't be able to travel till the next afternoon, early afternoon. Their bus wouldn't come in for them. And I invited them home to stay overnight with us. And they were very hesitant to do that. And they wanted to talk about it. And so I walked away. They came back, and they declined. And I said, look, I'm a pastor, and I'm safe. You won't be harmed if you come with me and my wife, and I would like you to stay overnight with us, and tomorrow you could continue your journey. This is not really a safe place for you to be overnight. So they did come home with me. And Jan prepared some food for them, and we learned that they were on their honeymoon. This is what they were doing for their honeymoon. So they were able to have a shower. They needed one because they really didn't smell very good. So we were so glad that they could have a shower. We told them tomorrow morning we go to church in the morning. You can sleep as long as you want. You can wash your clothes, take your showers, and then go to L.A. So we went to church, and they were not there when we came back. But about 2 or 3 weeks later, we received a lovely letter from them thanking us for our hospitality. It was so special to be able to provide them with a little bit of home away from home when they were traveling for their honeymoon. Late one evening, I was pastoring a large church in Southern California. Late one evening, I was driving down the main street on the way home. There was a young man standing at a bus stop, and I thought, wow, he must not know that the buses are not running now. So I stopped and asked if he was waiting for the bus. He said, yes. I said, well, son, the buses aren't running this late. Can I give you a ride wherever you need to go? So he took me to a neighborhood, to a house where he was staying, and I walked with him to the doorway, and the house was full of people sleeping all over the floor. It looked like homeless people had gathered there. And I thought, wow. I said to him, you should come home with me, and you'll sleep more comfortably if you come home to our house. So he did. In my study, we had a hide-a-bed. So I just put him to bed in the hide-a-bed in my study. And it was late. The next morning when Jan and I woke up, I said, dear, I picked up a young man last night, and he's asleep in my study. And she said, Bob, she said, he might be a thief. We might find our house, everything stolen. I said, he might be an angel. Oh, you. Well, he had breakfast with us. He was homeless. And he ended up staying with us 3 weeks. But you know, he went right out the next day looking for a job. And he found a job in a shoe store, probably a mile or two from our place. And he went to work. He got a bicycle. Then he could ride the bicycle back and forth to work. We took care of him. He ate with us. He slept with us. We just took good care of him. And discovered that his father worked in a newspaper office in that city. I got the father's name, and I called the father and told him that his son was living with us. And the father was so grateful. He said, oh, I'll be glad to pay you money to take care of his expenses, his living expenses. I said, no, it's not necessary. We're glad to do it. And I told the father that his son had a good job and was working. And the boy then got his own apartment so that he could have his own place to live. The father was so grateful to know where his son was. The son had left home and didn't tell his parents where he was. It was so satisfying to be able to bring that father and son back together. And one of the most exciting things happened in our own congregation in Orofino, Idaho, years later. I was sharing this same message in my own home church, and while I was speaking, a stranger came in and sat in the back row of the church, had a backpack, and he had been hiking along the highway, a 2-lane highway, along Highway 12, along the Clearwater River. And our church is on just up off on a rise above the river. He had come in with his backpack, sat in the back, and after church, my wife and I invited him home for lunch. We discovered that he had some mental issues, some mental problems, and then he gave us his parents' phone number, and we called the parents. They didn't know where their son was, and they were so grateful. They were 2 or 3 hours away. Well, it was longer than that, I guess. And they asked if they could come and pick him up on Sunday morning or Sunday. It wasn't morning when they got there. They drove a long way to rescue their son. It was so rewarding to be God's agents, to bring that family together, to bring that boy back. He was in his 30s, maybe early 40s. But that wasn't the end of the story. What I didn't know was that day there was a older man. He was young to me at that time, who was visiting the Adventist church. And he had relatives who were Adventists. And he was not an Adventist, but he was visiting the Adventist church that day when I shared this message. And we didn't know this till later, but later when he was baptized and joined our church, he told the congregation the big thing that had influenced him to join the church. It was the day that Pastor Hancock preached the sermon about entertaining angels, and he noticed that we took that young man home. And he heard the rest of the story, and he said, I was so impressed that the preacher practiced what he preached. And he joined the church and became an elder in our congregation. Dear ones, let us not neglect to entertain strangers. For some, unwittingly, have entertained angels. And I praise God for the privilege of being one of his agents, bringing others into the kingdom simply by sharing food at our tables. God bless us. Amen.